So, hello, we are here today with Patricia Loofbourrow, who is going to tell us all sorts of wonderful things about the world of books and words and writing, because we can't get enough of writing. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment.
I'm Patty Loofbourrow, and I'm the author of the Red Dog Conspiracy steampunk crime fiction series.
Ooh, steampunk.
Yes. And I'm originally from Southern California, and I've lived here in central Oklahoma since 2005.
Okay.
Married with 3 grown children.
Mm-hmm.
My books have done okay.
That's always a good thing. So are you working on a current project at the moment, or are you just sort of getting your books out into the world?
Right now, I have just finished the first draft of book 6 in the Red Dog Conspiracy, which is called The Five of Diamonds.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working right now on a couple other projects, one of which is a prequel to the series, and that will probably come out in the spring sometime.
Ooh, a prequel. Very fun. So 6 books so far. Do you have plans for the rest of the series to continue onward, or you just, do you have a number for how many books you want, or are you just going to keep going?
Yeah, this is actually a 13-part series.
Wow.
And the series is actually one big book. So I call each book a chapter. If you can imagine a 243-page chapter. But so it's already planned, pretty much planned out, the whole 13-book series. Because this is a very huge world, I have several prequels out already and a companion book. This story is it's set 1,899 years after the catastrophe, which is a global disaster that happened.
Okay.
And people that's really not the focus of the story. Now we have, after this catastrophe, so many years, we have what was once the United States is now a kind of a federation of independent city-states, which are covered by domes and run by steam power.
Uh-huh.
Electricity with geothermal steam power.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular city of which is called Bridges, which is set basically, if you covered the whole state of Oklahoma with a dome, that's where you'd be.
Wow.
And so this city has been split between 4 crime families. Uh-huh. And the story is about a woman, a private investigator named Jacqueline Spadros, and she is married into one of the crime families, but secretly is an investigator.
Ooh.
And so she's living a double life.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like that could be super fun.
I think it is. But basically where the story begins is with a child abduction.
Oh, no.
And so, but it's not just any kid, it's the child of someone she knows.
Mm-hmm.
And so she is kind of dragged into this whole thing and finds out that this is a way bigger thing than she ever thought.
Oh, dear.
Therefore, the conspiracy.
Yeah. Wow. So describe your steampunk world building, because steampunk, from what I understand, can take a couple of different directions, with the sort of high-tech steam version or the Victorian steam version. So which are you?
This is kind of a mix of both. This is far future steampunk, and their technology is beyond ours. Like, we couldn't put a whole dome over Oklahoma and have an aperture which Zeppelins can ride through and back and forth, and we don't have Zeppelins that could carry hundreds of people.
Yeah,
we just had never got the technology to do that. But
no.
But the city itself, the city of Bridges, is basically mid-Victorian.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the thinking, the dress is more like late 1890s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's a very patriarchal society, and it's very set into the Victorian era, with
Mm-hmm.
all that implies.
Oh my. I bet that was fun for your poor main character.
Yes. Well, yeah, one of the things I feel like that this is more of a deconstruction of steampunk rather than, I mean, it is steampunk. There's a lot of
Right.
steam powered stuff going on. But a lot of people, the Victorian era was nice if you were rich, white, and male. If you were
Right.
not, then it was really bad. So,
Right.
so anyway, that was kind of one of the things that I thought of while planning out the series
Mm-hmm.
is kind of showing, just kind of the drawbacks in steampunk if you
Yeah.
want to do it as a kind of like I think a lot of steampunk today is romanticizing the Victorian era,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is not really the best thing in the world.
No,
But it's
perhaps
fun.
not.
It's fun.
No.
Yeah. It can be fun.
Oh yeah. So how does Jacqueline go about navigating this society if she's trying to lead a double life, which is already difficult, I would imagine, and that double life is as an investigator, which requires that she ask probably impertinent questions to people who have power, would be my guess.
Yeah, well, she has help, obviously.
Okay. Okay.
And she has a dressmaker who
Okay.
is kind of helps get her cases,
Mm-hmm.
and she'll go to the dressmaker, and her husband doesn't really know long it takes for a dress to be made. So while she's at the dressmaker, she slips out the back and changes her disguise into a disguise, and she goes off and does her thing and then shows up again
Mm-hmm.
when it's time to go home. So
That's great. Oops.
yeah, so she does have help. She has been doing this for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that immediately comes up in the story is that not only is she, married into this crime family, the crime
Right.
families control the city. And so
Right.
she actually has a very high social status and things that she's supposed to be doing as somebody with a high social status.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes her investigations get in the way of that because she only has so much time.
Oops.
So there's some conflicts there. Her family, her crime
Mm-hmm.
family, wouldn't really be very happy if they found out she was doing this.
Oh, probably not.
So, it's quite a dangerous thing she's doing.
But what about the other crime families? Because you said there were four, so I
Yes.
imagine there's a bit of
Yes.
competition there.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
boy.
There's competition. They've only recently been at the relatively peaceful coexistence they're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I'm kind of a history fan,
Ooh,
and
history.
I patterned the four families off of the five families of the Chicago mob.
Right.
And one thing that Al Capone wanted to do was take over Chicago and make it entirely his. And
Right.
of course, he never did that. But
Well, no.
I was thinking, well, what if he did? What if somebody like that, these four families, and they tried to do that. They tried to get the five families together into a group called the
Mm-hmm.
Commission,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I call my street team. And
Aha.
and they tried, but they couldn't make it work because the five families just started fighting each other, and it just kind of all fell apart. And
Yeah.
now we don't really have it that organized today. But
No.
it is right now a period of relative peace.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier it had not been.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have like one of my prequels. The first in the series, by the way, is called The Jack of Spades, and Jack is spelled with a Q because Jacqueline, right?
Yeah.
And the whole series kind of has a playing card and card game theme for a couple reasons, which I can go into if you like. But
well, as long as you don't spoil the novel, then absolutely go for it.
oh no, I can go into that in a minute. But what I was going to say is that, the way this happened is that 100 years before there was they used to have a kind of a monarchy. And basically 100 years before the start of the story, there was a coup. And that kind of is how the city ended up being split between 4 crime families, because since then there's been pretty much all this sort of gang warfare and things going on. And these are the 4 families that have seized these 4 quadrants of bridges, which is named so because there's 4 rivers that split the city and there's a bunch of bridges. So
yeah, that makes sense.
That's why that was named. So I have kind of like a future history sort of thing going in this as well.
Fun.
Where this history that happened 100 years ago is directly influencing what's going on now.
Right.
So that's just one of my prequels of good going on. But back to the card theme. I'm very interested in culture in science fiction, because you have all these different technologies, you have all these different societies that come from and that are directly related to, say, your big government, and but most of the naming and the ideas that people have about life come from the dominant religion of the group. And so that kind of sets up your culture, your cultural basis. And even if you don't believe in the religion, it really influences your whole society, and it really influences your naming customs.
Yes.
For example, here in, I don't know where you live, but in the United States, for a great deal of the time, Christianity has been the dominant religion. And so you have all these Mark, Mary, Luke, John, James, all these kind of names. And in the same way, the society that Bridges is part of, the dominant religion is around playing cards and card games. And so you get people named Ace or Jack or,
I like that.
And the 4 families have kind of taken on this mantle. And for example, there's the Diamond family, who is and the Hart family. And although the way the spellings are not exact, and there's a Club family, and so they've taken on these names and the symbols of the quote unquote holy cards. And so they are, showing, thinking that they are, there's a lot of propaganda and stuff going on too. But,
yeah, I imagine.
But anyway, it's just been interesting. So that's why all my series is all card game themes, and words. So I had fun running through Wikipedia on that one. It's how many names can I find?
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, absolutely. Great fun. So how did you create a religion based on card games? I mean, is that to do with the whole, crime family type thing, or is it an older tradition that you've had in your world?
Yeah, actually, I touch on that a little tiny bit in, there's one of my fans just said she had to have a story about the catastrophe, because the Jack of Spades starts 1898, but it's New Year's Eve that it starts, so it's basically 1899 years after the catastrophe. And this gal was like, I have to have something about the catastrophe. And at first I was like, I don't really want to write another disaster novel. There's so many out there, and they're all the same. It's like you have this giant wave or asteroid or whatever, and then there's scientists and politicians, and that's all you hear about, or some rich guy. And I was like, I don't want to write another story like that. So I decided to write it as if a guy that is just right in the middle, doesn't know what the heck is going on, and he experiences that. But near the end, they do touch a little bit on how the card game, the fixation on cards and card games starts. But basically, it's evolved over the last, almost 1900 years,
Right.
to be like a pretty dominant religion in the society. And basically, it's a pantheistic, or
Mm-hmm.
not pantheistic. It's there's multiple gods.
Right. Right.
There's okay. Now let me back up a little bit. The way
Okay.
I wanted to set up this story is not as a straight. It's kind of a genre mash,
Mm-hmm.
but the basic idea of the genre is that it's a noir fiction.
Ooh.
Noir fiction. And
Yeah.
it's gender flipped noir, though, because
Okay.
the straight noir will have the
Mm.
man is the detective, you have
Right.
the femme fatale, you have
Right.
the, all that kind of thing. So I have the woman is the detective in this,
Mm-hmm.
but I've tried to make it as close to noir as possible.
Mm-hmm.
One of the basic features of noir is kind of like a existential, nihilistic sort of worldview.
Yeah.
And so if you have a religion in which your fate is determined by the random play of cards from an impersonal
Oh.
shuffler, at the moment of your birth, your hand is given to you and you just kind of have to play it, you know.
Very cool. I like that.
And the hand is given to you, from the shuffler. It's given to the dealer, who
Mm-hmm.
actually there's a whole female religious sect called the Dealers, and they are considered very high up in the society, but they take like vows of poverty. I mean, it's
Right.
sort of
Right.
similar to other religious groups, but they're very powerful in the society, and they're the dealers. But the whole city believes that the dealer has given you your hand. The dealer, like the goddess, has
Mm-hmm.
given you your hand at birth, and you kind of need to play it. And it's like there's no sense in whining about your hand. You got your hand, go play it.
Yeah.
And you either play it well or you don't. And then there's other ones that are like more minor deities, like the floor man, which you could pray to help you with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Lady Luck, you could pray to if you want, but Lady Luck, just kind of random, so whatever. And so anyway, I mean, to have that as your base worldview is
That is
really kind of
yeah.
it's kind of bleak, but but the four families have kind of exploited this. So if people complain about the fact that they're living in abject poverty while the crime families are living it up, it's like, that's your hand. You guys are just low cards. You just have to deal with it. It's like,
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like that. You could play around with that a lot.
oh, I'm having fun with it. But it's kind of funny. Like if I look through my reviews, I can totally tell who gets what I'm doing and who doesn't, because it'd be like, guys, this is really weird. Or it's like, well, okay, you don't understand more. But yeah, because there's a whole bunch.
Great. Yeah, I love it.
So anyway, that's some kind of just a little smidgen of what's going on as far as the world building.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have never seen a religion based on cards, but now that you've described it, I can imagine so many different things that you can do. That is really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit the ideas. I mean, not that the Hindu religion is really like this,
Mm-hmm.
like the whole. It's not quite so existential and all that,
Right. Right.
But the idea of just these multiple gods and the whole caste system that comes
Mm-hmm.
from the way that the religion looks at your life. Like if you're reincarnated, there is reincarnation in this too, because when you die, your cards go back to the shuffler and are shuffled and given to other people.
Right.
So and then there's beliefs that like if you die right after somebody in your family. I mean, if you're born right after somebody in your family dies, you might get their cards, but that's kind of one of those folk beliefs rather than the canon of the church.
Right. Good fun though.
But yeah, so there's all kinds of ideas floating around about what actually happens when you die, and
Right. Wow. Okay, I sort of feel badly for your characters because this society sounds kind of difficult.
Well, people have fun and play their cards and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, when I say play their cards, there's no card games allowed in this religion. Only
really?
only the dealers of old. Okay, I got to back up again. People are not allowed to touch the cards because they're holy. And only certain people can touch the actual playing cards. But yeah, this has a lot of layers to it. It's still going on world building. Before this coup that happened 100 years ago, the major center of worship was the cathedral, which is in an area of the city which is closest to the points of these four quadrants, because the city is round, because it's under a dome, and you have these four quadrants and these rivers, and the rivers actually meet up in an island in the center, but which is kind of neutral territory for the four families. But in each quadrant, there is a couple, 2 or 3 miles right at the center of each quadrant, which used to be the main center of the city. And that during the coup, and in one of those quadrants, actually the same quadrant that Jackie lives in, and the family that controls it, she's the one married. She's married into that. She used to live there, and before the coup, that was the main center of the city, and after the coup or during the coup, that main central part was destroyed, and the people and a fence had been built around to keep out people that they didn't like. And but what happened during the coup was those people basically took overthrew that, wrecked the place, and built what is now the four quadrants around that. And the people inside are still kept inside by this fence.
Oh my.
And yeah, kind of
problematic.
Palestinian-like in a way. And so basically the cathedral was inside that area, and it was sacked, but it still stands. And that was where the dealers, the female religious sect, was based. And before the coup, they saw it was coming, so they kind of scattered. And but I talked a lot more about that in the prequel. The one prequel called the Alcatraz coup, which is basically how that happened. If you're really interested, that would be the place to look. But that's not the start of the story. The start of the story is the Jack of Spades, and the main story. But anyway, so the added layer upon which Jackie is dealing with her life is that she was actually born in the cathedral and had been sold to the Spadros family when she was 12. And that was basically something really bad happened that night that she was sold, and so she's basically your typical anti-hero with PTSD, and she's got a lot of issues from that, and related to that is this child abduction, because somebody that she knew was killed that night, and this is a relative of that person, and so it's bringing back this whole past that she doesn't want to deal with. So,
but I mean, this sounds exactly like a noir piece. It's fantastic.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm glad you think so, because that's what I've been trying to do.
Well, that's great. So moving a little bit sideways from world building and going into writing process, is there a least favorite part of the writing process? And I include everything from idea phase to money in the bank phase.
I find revision the most challenging. I wouldn't say the most challenging, because actually getting paid is pretty challenging as a writer. But I think as far as like up to launch, I think revision I find really challenging still. I feel like I'm still learning. I worked as an editor before I started, like a nonfiction editor, before I started writing novels. And so the editing part isn't, I do have an editor, more like proofreader
Right.
person, of somebody I've known for like decades. So to like clean up anything I miss. But so that part I don't find very difficult. But yeah, revision sometimes. I think it's getting easier as I'm writing more books, but I still have like 50 zillion threads that I'm have to.
I know that feeling.
Because it's such a big story, and
oh yeah,
there's so many things going on, and I have to, like with the last one I did was called The Ten of Spades, and it came out in October. And to do the revision for that one, I had to finally just stop and go through every single plot line and subplot and side plot and all that stuff, and figure out when it happened when it's supposed to happen.
Oh my!
Because yes,
wow,
major spreadsheets, and I've got like this whiteboard that's still sitting on the wall of my house.
Wow, I'm impressed.
As far as when things are happening, because it's kind of fun, because like I'm just like powering towards the midpoint, which is going to be the end of book 7, and I'm writing book 6 I just finished the first draft of book 6, so it's getting really exciting for me, because I feel like the story is just starting to really get going,
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. That's great. I mean, revision, many threads, but still, it sounds like oodles of fun.
It is. It's getting to be fun. And I think my earlier like struggles with doing it is, I think, mainly just a learning curve sort of thing.
Right.
It's been way easier, like writing this one that I just finished, the first draft of, was way easier. Because I feel like I've finally started to get the hang of how to set up your outline, and because I was a total pantser before I started this series, and I realized I had to get my act together if I was going to do this right.
So how was that transition?
I don't have anything against outlines. It's just hadn't been the way I've been writing for the past 10 years, 8 or 10 years before that. And so I'd been kind of just pantsing things and, just not publishing anything because it didn't quite seem right. And then I got this idea, and I was like, ooh, this is the one. So, actually I kind of like outlines. It's just I hadn't ever done that, and I hadn't been quite so organized with things. So it was a challenge. It's been a challenge.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm still in the pantsing stage, and who knows if that'll ever change.
There's lots of people for which that works. I just think for this, where there's so many factions and so many threads that are actually, pretty much every one is important to the story. If they don't work, the story's not going to work. And so it's not just, it's really it's one person's story, but it's one person's story in a whole set of stories that are all impacting her. And I have to know when certain things happen in order to know how to deal with her.
Well, it sounds like huge amounts of fun. And also, how many prequels do you have?
Oh, well, so far I have 3.
3. And a companion novel.
And a companion novel. Actually, the companion novel came out this year. It's fairly recent, but it's running along the same time frame as the first book, The Jack of Spades. And it's called Drawing Thin, is a poker term. And it is basically from the point of view of the officer who's first on the scene at the child abduction, and what the police is doing. Now, the police is horribly corrupt and incompetent, and everything you might expect in a city that's run by crime families.
Exactly, yeah.
But there are a few people who are trying to hold it together and actually be good policemen, and this guy is one of them. And he's not really having a good time of it because he's a competent, good police officer in a city run by crime families, so he's kind
Yeah.
of out of water, you know.
Yeah. I can see how that would be problematic.
Yeah, and so that's kind of his. It's a companion to the Jack of Spades. It's like two stories running in parallel.
Right. What
Um,
fun. How is that to write? Because from what I understand, you have to have the same things happening at the exact same time. But yeah, I've never done that before.
it was difficult mainly because when I wrote the Jack of Spades, I was writing about a really privileged woman who kind of does whatever she wants whenever she does it, and I didn't put a lot of dates. Like I didn't figure out the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And but our constable here, he has a work schedule, and so I have to fit his work schedule into when he actually. There's a couple times where he interacts with her, and so they have to get together and on a day that he's at work, you know.
Right, right.
And so that was kind of challenging, but it worked out, and I like it. I mean, if people really like it, I may add some more to that. It is kind of, but I thought that what the police were doing at the same time was kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
To see what is actually going on, because from her point of view, it seems like nobody's doing anything.
Right.
That's really not the case. It's like this guy is fighting to get somebody to pay attention and take this, this whole thing seriously. And there's a lot of other stuff going on too. There is a serial killer running around. There's all sorts of stuff happening. So
yeah. Oops. So for people trying to, well, I don't know if genre mash is perhaps the right word, but combine noir with sci-fi or steampunk in your case, do you have any traps that they should avoid?
I think if you're going to multi-genre things, the biggest thing is reader expectations for each genre, because I've had problems where steampunk people, they hear steampunk and they think happy shiny steampunk, and this is not happy shiny. This is the other side, which is the dark gritty, which is the punk steampunk, and if you don't make the reader expectations clear, like in your descriptions and blurbs and ads and stuff, you can get unhappy readers. And then the other side of it is the noir, and a lot of readers don't understand noir fiction, and they think that this is like, it is a hard-boiled mystery, which is where most of the classic noir came from. But then if people hear mystery and they think cozy, it's like, no. This is not a cozy mystery, let me tell you that. There is definite death and shootouts and badness. So I've had a couple of readers unhappy with that. But so it's basically making sure that you not only hit all the genre tropes for each genre that you're trying to mix together, but that you're very clear in your, as clear as you can be anyway, in things like your ads and your descriptions and your branding, that it's definitely not a
happy-go-lucky steampunk.
It's not a happy steampunk adventure.
No.
Which is what some people, that's all they think of. And it's not a fantasy either. There are a lot of people that are under the impression that steampunk is fantasy, but actually steampunk never has got its roots in science fiction.
Yes. And
has, pretty much the whole fantasy and paranormal side of steampunk has kind of been a relatively new thing. So, but a lot of people think, well, this must be, either they believe that it's in the past, which it's not, or they think that it's a fantasy, which is not. So that's something. It's but it's a little bit. Anytime you mash up genres, especially with genres where it's not really clear what it is, it can be a challenge. I think, but it can be done very successfully. I mean, look at all the people that are writing things like paranormal romance. I mean, that's a mix that you probably wouldn't have seen
Oh, golly.
10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah,
But
no, that's a fairly new one.
it's doing quite well now.
It is, yes. Well, I think your books sound absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested to read them.
Yay!
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add, writing related or otherwise?
Well, we can talk about whatever you like. Yeah, writing. I started writing novels in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got my start through the National Novel Writing Month,
Yeah.
which is actually still going on, but I finished the draft that I wanted to finish of the Five of Diamonds. So I'm kind of done with that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I don't know if your readers or your listeners are familiar with it.
I think it's fairly large in the writing community.
Okay, so anyway, I always do my main series drafts during Nano.
Mm-hmm.
But so I had a bit of experience writing before I tried to publish a novel, and I think that's the place where a lot of people get tripped up.
Mm-hmm.
Just personally, I know it's kind of an unpopular thing to say these days, but I really feel like people should. Personally, I felt that writing, your traditional million words before you start publishing both helps you. I mean, it helps you in a lot of ways, and I really don't feel like there's a downside to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the general wisdom now is write a book and just throw it out there,
Oh dear.
Which, I mean, a lot of people, and people point to people like Harper Lee, who wrote a book and published it, but she had been a journalist for like
a very long time.
20, 30 years before she did that. So she knew how to write.
Right.
And so I think for me, if anybody wanted any writing advice, was don't rush. I mean, to publish, write 8 or 10 books, or a couple hundred short stories, or whatever you want to write, and that will get rid of a lot of the nerves and get you some friends in the writing community, and so that when you do publish, you'll have something to publish too. And I mean, there's so many things that it just learning to write on your own dime.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of advantages to that I think for me, it was like my very first novel that I wrote, back in 2005. I mean, someday I might publish it, but
probably
I was more like wanting to write because I love to write. And so after writing, I think I wrote 10 novels or something that I still have. And I've taken little ideas from each of them to put into the Jack of Spades and the Red Dog Conspiracy. But I think having all that under my belt, when I did get the idea that I felt like I could really go with this idea of a noir future,
right,
that I felt very confident about it because I had that much writing behind me. Not that I write perfectly now. I certainly don't, but
I don't think anybody writes perfectly.
But that would be, if somebody wanted a piece of advice, I would just say write first and don't even think about publishing until you'll know when it's time. And the more you write before that, the quicker it'll get, and you'll know. And I knew that this is what I wanted to go with, and it was kind of about the same time. I published the Jack of Spades in 2015, but when I got this idea for the series in the end of 2013, it was right when the tide was starting to turn. The time was right for the self-publishing.
Right.
We're starting to really get into self-publishing, and it was starting to be an actual, not this huge scandal that you would dare to self-publish sort of thing that it used to be.
No, I understand that completely. And writing many things, many things before publishing, I think is probably a great idea. I did it myself, and I'm glad I didn't publish those first few things because
Oh God, yeah.
they
You don't
were
even want to see the first things I
ooh,
published. They were very, some of them were, I mean, you get all that problematic stuff that's lurking around in your
uh-huh,
subconscious out of there, and
uh-huh,
it's not like out for everybody to see, I think is the biggest thing.
uh-huh. Probably a really good idea.
So,
Well, it has been absolutely fantastic talking with you. I love your world building ideas. They're just great.
I'm
So
glad you
thank you
liked
so
it.
much for doing this.
Well, thanks for having me.